Society Matters.
Welcome back to HMTV. I'm your co-host, Bernie Furshpan, with Alan Mindel, my co-host. And our series is called Raised by Survivors. We got a lot to say. We've got a lot to say. We've said a lot so far, right, Alan? And we've got very similar experiences, that's for sure. I mean, my mom had the best sense of humor. I got to tell you, I got my sense of humor from my mother, and I learned from my dad great business ethics, appreciation for the little things. He was a lover. He loved everybody. Everybody loved him. No matter what he went through, he still loved people. I don't know how that even happens, but
because they had a level of passion like no one else, you know.
It's so true.
And
many of them became very successful.
They were very successful, but they valued those relationships, especially with the other survivors.
Very true.
You know, there was more passion through it. I think a lot of that success, was to that sheer will that there was no such thing as quitting on anything ever. Mm-hmm. And B was that they were going to make the most out of every opportunity, no matter what. And they were just a different, stronger breed of people.
It's so true. Even Muhammad Ali said once, he said, if I ever lose a fight, it's because I didn't suffer enough. Basically, what he was saying is that in order to be successful, you got to pay your dues.
And you know what? What we consider suffering here,
right,
they would laugh at.
It's true.
It didn't matter one bit.
Right. I mean, that show Survivor to me, it's a joke.
Yeah.
You're on an island, there's coconuts, right? There's fish in the pond, and you got a camera crew just in case you throw up. But my dad lived in a forest eating rabbit carcass, berries, mushrooms, and he somehow managed to get through. His entire family was wiped out. But he got through, and it's because of that I have to tell his story. I owe it to them.
What did he do after liberation? Because he was in the forest.
So after liberation, from what he told me, he did not come running out when the Russians came through. They didn't trust anybody. They lived in the forest for several months later. Right. But the Russians put on the outskirts of the forest clothing and food for the Jews to come out, slowly but surely. Just the way you put like a bowl of milk for a stray cat. Right. And slowly but surely, they trusted them. Once the war was over, he ended up in a DP camp in Germany, and that's how it happened.
My mom had some time in DP camps, especially because she was so sick. Mm-hmm. For my dad, it was different. The war ended, and he really didn't know exactly what had happened to his mother or his father, or his baby sister or his brother, and so he went back to the house, and he quickly discovered, that none of it worked out, and that they were gone. His oldest brother being the most painful because it was really a very recent event that occurred. He had survived, 4 years, and then was discovered, and it was over just at the end there. So, he had a rage from that. Mm-hmm. And he never liked to tell his stories, but it would bleed out, like we said, when you're sitting there. But I'll never forget, he told me, the neighbors around the house, and these were all the neighbors that hated his guts, as he was going to school and right before the Holocaust had begun, and other things that they chased him and tried to catch him as it begun, he comes back, and they all come running out of their house saying, we had no idea. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know how it occurred. And he did not believe that for a heartbeat. And he went up to them and he said, clear as day, he said, listen, before this war started, I could handle myself with all of you. 16 years old, you know. Now, it's 6 years later. I'm that much older. I'm that much stronger. I'm that much tougher. If you think I was something to handle then, you have no idea what I am now.
My dad, too. He was very tough, actually.
Yeah. And he told every one of them, he said, listen, when I'm in this house, you guys can enjoy the outside here, the street. You can go play and do whatever you want. When I'm not in the neighborhood, you can do whatever you want. But when I walk out this house, if I see you in the street, you come up to me. I'll end you right there. You don't come out when you see me. That's how we're going to live here. And that's how we lived. He never spared them a second of it, you know. He was so, that was kind of like his ethos, you know. So I'm getting raised by that guy who, you know, no one would mess with.
Right.
You know, and so you say, well, did that translate, you know, later in life? So my dad was a pretty successful plumber, which is really kind of an understatement, you know. I haven't done very much in my life. My dad really was a successful guy. He created the largest plumbing contractor east of the Mississippi with 450 union plumbers.
Wow.
You know.
That's pretty incredible.
It was pretty incredible. And I met this guy a few years ago, you know, through our hotel business that was having a Seder. And he said, did I ever tell you the story? Your father was the toughest guy I ever met. And I said, no. He said, he was also crazy. I said, yeah, I might have known a little about that, but tell me the story. He says, you know, I'm in a negotiation with the plumbers union. I'm the lawyer, the Jewish lawyer in the room for the union. And then there's the negotiating team for the union. There's the negotiating team for the contractors. And your dad is on the negotiating team. And, you know, half the guys in the room are mafia, you know. And they said they loved your father. They just loved him. But your dad goes to the bathroom, and one of the guys goes, you know, Sam is so full of himself. He's so strong-willed. He's so tough. You know, we got to bring him down a few pegs and bring him into size. When he comes back, you start a fight with him, and we'll pull the gun out and teach him a lesson. So he comes back, and the guy starts the fight. My dad comes out there, and the two of them come up to each other, and the guy pulls out the gun and puts it to my dad's temple. Starts cursing him out, you know, I'm going to kill you. And my dad starts laughing hysterically. And the guy goes, what the are you laughing at? And my dad turns to him and he says, you think you're the first to put a gun to my head? The guy goes, what? And at that moment, my dad grabs the gun, flips it around and puts it to his head. He goes, now let me ask you a question. How many guys have put a gun to the temple of your head? And it was a made guy that he did that to. Wow. And everyone went, that was it. No one ever.
That's an incredible story.
You know, so that's how my dad was. And so I knew, you know,
there was a time I worked for my father. He was also in construction. He did plastering and tile work. He was so good at what he did. You know the crown moldings you have in these very wealthy homes on Park Avenue?
Yeah.
They were made from plaster by hand. It wasn't like a molding that you buy and you stick it on.
Yeah, it was
he
the real work.
He actually did it. He actually made those. And he was hired by John Lennon of the Beatles to do his bathroom and kitchen.
Wow.
He was that good at what he did. He was just a spectacular. He was my hero. But there was one time I worked with him in the summer.
Right.
And listen to this. We're in a diner.
Right.
I remember it was on 3rd Avenue.
Right.
And there was this, we're sitting by the, like the bar.
Right.
And there was a guy looking at my food, a big guy.
Right.
Looking at my food. My father looks at him, takes out a screwdriver out of his pocket and says, don't look at my son's food. It's like, wow, some instinct just popped out.
Right, he
Probably
was ready
when
for
he
it.
was living in the forest, because they were fighting for every crumb of bread.
Right.
But that made him react in such a way, it scared the hell out of me. It really did.
Right.
But my mom put some pressure on my brother and I to succeed. She wanted to see my father happy. She raised him. You know.
Right.
And, my brother and I, we both got we got doctorate degrees. And they were very happy. You know, we were successful, and my brother had 2 kids, I had 2 kids. And then I pack it all in after 27 years in chiropractic, and I go into stand-up comedy. My mother's looking at me like, did you lose your mind? I said, Ma, you gave me the sense of humor. I'm going to use it. Because I was making my patients laugh. They loved what I did. I had enough bending over 7 days a week.
Right.
It was exhausting work. I had a huge, huge practice. But I think I had enough. And so I had a marketing agency. I had other businesses. And so I kind of packed it all in, and I got into stand-up. I had a 5-minute career. Literally, that's what it's felt like. My mother goes to me, I sent you to school to be a doctor. What do? You get up there and you tell jokes to perfect strangers. You talk to them about your family. I said, Ma, how do you know they're perfect?
Right.
She says, listen, show me some of the videos. I want to see what you're talking about.
Right.
It took me months until I had the guts to show her because I was afraid how she was going to react. She is dying laughing. She is plotting, and she goes, you know what? Everything you said is true.
Well,
she said, you are terrific. I had a great career for that short time. You are terrific. And she says, but do me a favor. Don't show your father because he's going to take it personally. So what happened was that what ended my career was I actually bought the original Gotham Comedy Club that turned into the Metropolitan Room. My wife and Joanne, we ran it. And we had a wonderful 8 years running it until COVID.
Yeah.
What about you have a great sense of humor. Did you get it from your parents too?
My parents had a great sense of humor. I mean, we would tell jokes that I can get in trouble for today. I would impersonate Kurt Waldheim. You know, we would do things like that. I mean, you know,
I did that too. I used to impersonate.
They couldn't get enough of watching foolish Nazi stuff. They just couldn't get enough of it, you know. It didn't bring pain to them. They loved it in a way that today would make people so uncomfortable, you know, and they loved it. But of course they had a sense of humor, because if you didn't have a sense of humor, you know, they would laugh anything off at this point with it. And they would laugh for hours.
Survival, isn't it?
They also loved comedians. They loved the Catskill comedians.
They did. Yeah, me too.
You know?
Me too. I think that's what made me want to do stand-up. And I had stage fright. So I go figure, right? I had stage fright, but yet I wanted to do comedy. I wanted to do stand-up comedy.
Because, I mean, honestly, it's the original Jewish art.
It really is.
You know?
It's definitely an art. You know, even in Germany.
Milton Berle, all the originals.
Right. Even in Germany, during the Republic, what is that? The Weimar Republic. Weimar Republic, before the Holocaust, Jews were very much involved in entertainment and music and the arts.
That's how Great Neck became Great Neck. It was considered, if you ever read The Great Gatsby, West Egg. And they talk about in The Great Gatsby how, like, it's all the new money and the dirty money that's in Great Neck. They said those aren't the refined people. And what they were talking about is Great Neck was filled with a bunch of Jews who, were the ones who were working Broadway and vaudeville and all of that,
Right, that's so true, yeah.
That's how it all came to be.
It's so true, it's so true.
They'd rather laugh 1,000,000 times over than watch a ballet or anything. They could care less.
They were pretty balanced. I mean, they cried and they laughed. So I would say they were pretty balanced. They enjoyed going to births, to weddings.
Yeah.
But they said, life is a cycle, and you have to go to funerals too. Oh. But there's also good moments in life. So they knew how to handle all of it.
They
emotionally
so loved their fellow survivors so much, and not just the survivors, but their kids. It was so important that everyone's kid found success, that everyone's kid was healthy, that everyone's kid got, better from whatever their thing or issue was, that they resolved it, and if the kid was fine, but just not hitting, the top of it, getting the A or passing and moving up in something, they would be so frustrated. Why wouldn't you work harder? It was like you've been given this gift to be in America.
Right.
What in the world are you doing? Right. How are you not taking this?
And I want to say that to young people today. There's so many great opportunities here.
I mean, I have great
How
kids.
could you not know what you want to do?
Yeah.
Many times they don't even know what they want to do. They go to college, they still don't know what they want to do.
And I get that. I mean, I think it's beautiful to have interests that are diverse.
Right.
You know, but you know, we look at our kids that are great today, but you know, they can't relate to the world that we grew up in, you know, where whether it's the food you can't waste, whether it's your papers for school. I mean, if there was a wrinkle in a paper, you know, on the edge of it, my dad would go, you know, you're bending the ears. He would grab my ear and bend the ear. He goes, you're going to bend the ears of it? Don't you respect the work? You know, it was a different mentality.
It was.
Of how that, you know, would play through.
You know, my parents defended each other. They loved each other so much.
Yep.
It was quite a sight to see. It influenced me. It impacted my life. And it was just such a joy to see how much they loved each other. But to a degree where my mother would defend my father the way a cat protects its kittens. Because she raised my dad, you see. So sometimes my dad, who had no education.
Right.
He didn't have the opportunity to go to school. He
Right.
worked pretty hard, you know, day and night. And, you know, he didn't know a lot. But he had a lot of street smarts.
And he learned the trade well.
He learned a trade. He had a lot of life wisdom, for sure,
Yeah.
more than the average person, without question. He really had a lot of wisdom. But he was, you know, wrong on a lot of things that I would point out to him. And my mother jumped on me like a cat. She would scratch my eyes out to protect and defend him. So like if he would say, you know, that particular thing is actually blue. And I said, Dad, I think it's red. She would jump in and say, your father's right. It is blue. I saw it in the news. I heard it on the radio. It's blue. Whether you like it or not, it's blue. She was ready to scratch my eyes out.
My two, that conversation didn't happen because there was no such thing as, you know, kibbud av v'em, respect for father and mother meant,
Right.
you know.
You didn't correct anybody.
You were not going to correct them.
Oh, my God.
That was a road that went one way. It wasn't a two-way street.
Well, I learned very quickly to be, you know, just to back off. Don't even say anything.
Yeah, just understand where you're at. You know, they weren't going to.
But I got to say that my mother was an angel for raising my dad.
Oh, my mom had, you know, an incredible maternal instinct, and she used it in every way and form of life. Because, you know, when she got to America, once again, dreamland. So first, you know, America gave people the opportunity to learn different things and different professions. My mom learned to be a dental hygienist. You're now looking at the only patient she ever had was me, because I never went to the dentist growing up. She'd look at my teeth. She'd do whatever she would do with them. It hurt like hell. There was never any Novocaine or anything like that. But, you know, she would learn it, so she did it. But, you know, they worked so hard together to make sure that they built a business of success. And right before I was born, you know, my father, who was a great, great builder, he built her a motor inn, you know, in Queens, you know, and then, you know, I came along. There I was with the boat coming at the wrong time, and you know, I'm at the hotel because she was a working mother, you know, and it wasn't even a thought like I'm gonna work, and she was the boss, but she ran the place like a family, you know, and it's funny, she never felt comfortable socially, you know, in our village so much with the people that were around her. Mm-hmm. But with people that were working there, that were from Poland, that had just come, no matter how things turned out with Poland, you know, she was most comfortable with them than she was there. And she made sure she ran everything with kind of like a family ethos. It wasn't, you know, the typical, you know, you did well, you did not do well, so we're going to fire you. It was just, you know, how the family was. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget, she had this bookkeeper, And she would always ride everyone hard to make sure we were productive, but she would do it in a loving way. The rooms had to be the cleanest. Everyone had to be welcoming and friendly. Everything had to be set the right way through it. And the woman, she came in, and after like 15 years, she was resigning. And at that point, I was a teenager, and I came in and I said, I don't know what was said or not said, but my mom truly loves you. She treats you like family. And she turned to me and she said, Alan, I love your mother. And believe me, I know I'm family. Mm-hmm. But it's just such an intense family. I'm not sure I can do it anymore. I got to go to a place where it's a little more relaxed here, Yeah. So she always had that.
My father wanted my mother to work and to experience work life in America, but my mother was guilt-ridden in doing that. She wanted to be home when her two boys got home from school, to have the food there. This is the way my mother was. She was very maternal.
Right.
There was King's Plaza that was built in the 1970s, early 70s. Okay. And they built Alexander's, if you remember Alexander's. And
my mom loved Alexander's.
All of her friends, found a job in Alexander's or Macy's. And she got a job in Alexander's, and she loved it.
Right.
But soon after, she started to feel this heavy, heavy weight of guilt. And she wanted to be there for her two boys when they came home, and she quit. And my father, he wanted her to be happy. Right. He wanted her to experience work life too, but he wanted her to be happy, and he was cool with that. And I had a great upbringing in Brooklyn. You had a great upbringing. This was great, spending time talking with you and learning more about. I knew some things, and you knew some things about.
The funny part is there's so much more of it. There's so many stories.
But we have so much in common about how we were raised by survivors.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's a lot of survivor children, offspring out there who probably can relate. This probably resonates with them.
What I got to figure out, and we had, as we're taping this, it was the day after the Upstander event last night. I look at my kids, because I know I wasn't raised like any of my peers, and I don't know if I really act like much of my peers. And, as two Gs, we have some of our own idiosyncrasies that are just different from other people,
We can go on for another 10 episodes talking about it.
Right. And we're not quick to stop on an argument. Right. We're not quick to give up on things either. There are things we learn that our compatriots don't quite get the way we got it, right? And I often wonder if that next generation, how much of it have they picked up on?
Right.
And what is it about that if they understand that? Because, the passion is meant to be there. Mm-hmm. I have people that ask me to say, how are you, you guys as a family, you seem crazy and yet you're close. What's this about? Mm-hmm. And they say, because they don't understand. It's not, to a lot of people, family is an optional relationship, people say, oh, you don't choose your family, you can choose your friends. But a lot of people, they choose whether they're fully engaged with their family. If you're a 2G, there is no choice. Mm-hmm. You may love them, maybe you can't stand them. But, the relationship is there, and you are not going to leave it. That's why you'll have the most people at the Seder. You'll have the most people that you'll talk to. You'll fly across the country and, hours away. And you might be one to say out loud to the person who just got married that was the most ridiculous thing you ever did in your life, as you had your, moment in the forest, with a teepee. But you're still going to show up, You're still going to be there for them, because it's inconceivable to you that, family is a gift.
Right.
Not everyone gets to have their family. Not everyone's family survives. And so whoever you have left, cherish that relationship.
Beautifully said.
Whatever friend you have,
Beautifully said.
cherish that relationship, because you're not necessarily entitled to that.
It's definitely a gift.
So make sure you make the most of it.
Absolutely. And I'm sure there's a whole lot of 2Gs that are listening in. And if you have some stories you want to share with us, Alan and I will be splitting this show. He can host it, or I can host it, but we're going to split it. And so we're going to have some more 2Gs in this particular series, raised by survivors here on HMTV at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. I want to thank you for joining this episode. Make sure to follow us and to stay tuned for more fantastic episodes here on HMTV.
Bernie, too much fun.
Too much fun. We'll continue to do this, and we'll see you guys soon.